All right, guys, welcome to another live session of the Watercraft Journal IRL. I am your host, the editor-in-chief of the Watercraft Journal. My name is Kevin Shaw. Thank you for everyone who is tuning in. I think we had a little bit of a hiccup when it came to scheduling, and that is because we're working with so many time zone differences, as our guest tonight is being very, very polite and staying up incredibly late to be tonight's guest. And for all of you who've been waiting to tune in, we again apologize for the delay. We were supposed to, we of course go live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it was scheduled incorrectly for 7 p.m. So that is why a lot of you guys were wondering where the heck is the show. So in case you were wondering, that is my problem. Mea culpa. I screwed up. That's on me. So let's get into tonight. I don't want to waste this man's time. I have been watching this gentleman's channel for a while now. He's been producing some fantastic content, and I quickly subscribed to Classic Jetskis. He's been speaking my language for a while now, and I think it was far too late. I should have reached out to him a while ago, but in recent videos, the host of Classic Jetskis, Mr. Joe Hill, Joe has been talking a lot about the future of Rec Lite and the importance of the Rec Lite segment. But first, I kind of want to get his take on what started Classic Jetskis, kind of what got him into this. And I'm going to let you take it away as everyone comes piling in now that we've started.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Likewise, I've been watching your channel for a long while, and yeah, the conversation is long overdue. So I'm Joe, obviously, and Classic Jetskis is a channel that started around 4 years ago, but the inception of it was long, long before that. I've been interested in jet skis as long as I can remember. My dad got me into skis basically when I was in my teens, and my dad had skis in the 90s, so he had like the Sea-Doo SP, the XPs, moved on to the 3-seater GTXs, and then there was a bit of a lull in a period where we didn't have skis, and then when I got to a point where I was like, yep, I actually want my own ski again, I realized that the skis that I was interested in, so your classic two-strokes from the 90s, essentially were a thing of the past. And in order to find one, I was going to have to work really, really hard, particularly here in the UK. We're not as blessed as you guys at having so many machines to pick from. And I spoke to every dealer here in the UK, and they all told me it was impossible. I would never find a two-stroke, which I saw as a challenge. And then fast forward 9 two-strokes later, the garage is full, the channel is growing, and I have an incredible, dedicated audience, which I'm so thankful for, that are all falling in behind me, supporting what it is I'm trying to do, which is essentially the philosophy of the channel is to keep the classics alive, and to basically just demonstrate the spirit of what I personally believe was one of, if not the greatest decades in PWC history, the 90s, of course, and a little bit of the early 2000s. But from your XPs to your GSXs to your Wave Raiders to your Blasters, pretty much I try to cover it all. HX, which is one of the newest machines that we're restoring at the moment. We go out, when I say we, my very, very supportive fiance, who actually does all of my camera work. So give Megan some love, because she enables all of these videos ultimately. My dad, who wingmans me on all of this to find the machines. And yeah, we're basically mad enough to go out all over the UK and buy an old ski, spend thousands of pounds on it to get it to operational state. And then I make videos to the best of my ability to showcase to you guys just how wonderful these machines are. And in all honesty, open a lot of people's eyes to what machines were around in the 90s, because for the uninitiated, which I'm sure we'll come on to, Kevin, PWCs have changed an awful lot. And people's expectation of what a PWC is now is completely different to where PWC started. And that's kind of one of the main things I know that we want to get into. I know you're eager to go into the conversation with me, but in essence,
this is fantastic. I have to admit something was Joe and I started talking probably about 20, 25 minutes before the show started, and we went right into, I mean, it was fantastic. And I realized, I'm like, we need to be on camera for this. Like, this is
saving the secret sauce, not to say too much too soon, but in essence, the blueprint for me for what the perfect PWC, which I'll lead straight out of the gate, is lightweight, playful fun, connection with the water, requires some level of rider skill to extract what the machine can do, keeps you guessing for longer than one ride, and just smiles for miles, as in you fall off, you get back on, you go again, and you pull up to a sandbar with your mates. It's fun inherently. And I believe that blueprint at the moment is only represented, and I'll let your audience guess, in a few of the machines that are on the market, and maybe not the machines that people think that I'm going to jump straight towards. So yeah, let's go for it.
Well, okay. So I had a couple questions now. What are there existing environmental restrictions in riding a two-stroke, especially a two-stroke, in the UK?
Very good question. So fundamentally at the moment, two-strokes are still allowed. You can still ride them, whether we're talking sea-based saltwater riding, you can still, as long as you have your permits to launch on the slipways and all that sort of stuff, you can still ride two-stroke. Lakes is very much predicated on the owner's own agenda when it comes to riding. So, for example, a place that I personally rode an awful lot was here in Bristol. So I'm southwest of the UK. There was a place called West Country Water Park. It was a great place to ride. That's ultimately been taken over by new owners. And what you'll start to see is they'll adopt new eco credentials. So two-strokes inherently are the first thing to go. They do a lot of open water swimming, a lot of like paddle boarding and all that sort of stuff. So two-strokes are just a no-no. But then equally, there are other lakes across the UK which still have, like that racer philosophy. And for a lot of like the hardcore, riders that love machines, you can still ride two-strokes. But I think it's one of those things that is just discretion of the lake, really.
Okay. Because I have seen a handful of your videos where you're on a moderately sized, maybe even small lake, but it does have like some buoys thrown out, and I'm like, oh, okay, good. He's got a little bit of a course. He's got some chicanes. He's got some hairpins. You're able to get, you're able to really put, stretch the legs of the skis and really be able to go out there and ride really hard. And so I was just curious as to, where you're able to put in.
We're okay at the moment. Cross everything, the two-strokes are still around for a long while yet.
Well, there's not a lot of you, so that's going to be a good thing. It's actually in your favor. Okay, so what really kind of cemented my decision to bring you in and made it, I realized that I had someone sympathetic to what I was feeling, was particularly when you put this up. And this to me was, first and foremost, kudos to your artistic talent as a graphic designer, because not only did you do the Retro XP logo, but you also did a modern iteration using the current Spark font and their styling. So I looked at this and I'm like, the problem is that these are so good that unless Sea-Doo cuts you a check, which they won't, because I know them.
They can have it. They can, if they do the Spark XP, they can literally they have it with my blessing.
They'll have it. Okay, you will take no claim to the artwork. The video that's associated with this one, I want to make sure I get the name right, was 2025 Sea-Doo Spark Legendary XP with two-stroke E-TEC, E-TEC. What was with the E-TEC engine. Okay, so I thoroughly enjoyed that video, and it was I mean, don't get me wrong, I as much as I'm sitting here at my home office, It looks like it was filmed exactly where you're sitting right now. But you did a fantastic job of articulating a point, of presenting an argument, providing a solution, and at the same time, you made the video entertaining by bringing in little jump cuts and fun little footage that actually made it. And I feel like I'm kissing your ass, but I really
keep going.
It's okay, great. So you're like, I'll take it. That video alone, I said, okay, this is possibly the most salient argument for what I have been dragged over the coals for bringing up 4 years ago. So let me preface this. Was 2019, it was about September of 2019. I am with Greg Gaddis and a lot of other media outlets, and we are at dinner with BRP for the new Switch. They're introducing the Switch at the time. For whatever reason, Greg and I are seated across from each other right next to a gentleman named Martin LaChance. And Martin LaChance is the vice president of product development for the Marine Division. Okay. Martin has me by at least 2 inches of height. I'm at my tall, I'm probably shrunk now, but he's easily 6'3", 6'4". He's a big guy. He's built like a boxer. And Martin, and he's completely shaved head. Martin is a lovely gentleman, and he's very friendly and effervescent. And he says, okay, what do you want to ask me? And Greg and I look at each other, we're like, all right, well, Greg goes into, we start talking about the 300 Ace, and we start talking about updates to the big engine, and here's what you could do, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, he's like, yeah, okay, guys, we get it. Now, of course, little did we know they were in early development of the new 325 engine at the time.
Yeah.
But what Martin or what I threw out, I said, so when are you going to throw the turbo 900 Ace engine in the Spark? Because it was a fit. And we knew that there were Austrian tuners, Rats. Who was it? Do you know offhand who the name of the shop is? I think they're out of Austria.
I
know. Putting turbos on them.
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay. But anyway, so we're floored. Like, I'm like, hey, listen, man, they're putting turbos on these things. They're going 64 miles an hour. And 64 tends to be around the threshold where the hull begins to lose actual safe contact with the water.
Yeah.
It is displacing so much that the intake grate, the ride plate cannot maintain traction, and it starts to wash out. So, don't get me wrong, there's going to be some guy who goes 70 miles an hour on a Spark and he goes, Kevin's full of crap, and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Of course.
But, I'm thinking for the masses.
Yeah.
So I bring up the turbo Spark. I said, listen, you got 150 horsepower, 160 horsepower in a Ski-Doo. The marinization process, which is the marinizing or preparing an engine for marine use, and that is an expensive process. That's the reason why the 1 liter Kawasaki engine is not in any jet skis. They don't want to pay the money for the marinization process.
Right. Okay.
Anyhow, so I said, hey, listen, snow is a very short jump from ocean. So marinizing, the Ace is already marinized. You need to marinize the turbo kit. And Martin sat back, and he kind of did this. He just kind of smiled, and he leaned in and he said, we tried turbos. They're too hot.
Right.
And I said, well, no. And he says, no. And he explained the routing that they had. And they said, it's a lot of room, and it runs too hot alongside the Polytech deck. And I was like, damn it. Okay. And I was disappointed. This is, again, 2019. Mm-hmm. And he again started to kind of laugh. And he says, but the 1630 fits right in it. And it's Greg.
Yeah.
Right. And Greg and I go, what was that? And he says, the 1630 fits right in there. Like, no problem. Naturally aspirated. He says, here's the reasons why the 1630 is the better option. He says, the 1630 has a better CAFE rating, better emissions rating.
Yeah.
So it looks good on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So, the environmental people who get all excited about this, they're happy with that rating. Number two, it's small and it's compact. There's less plumbing. There's no intercooler. There's not a lot of the trouble that goes into a turbo kit. Okay, fair enough. He says it doesn't run as hot. Okay. And he laughed and he says, we can't sell the 170 horsepower. He meant the 170 horsepower tune. And I said, oh, yeah? And he says, people will start killing themselves. Which, of course, we start laughing. We're like, okay, that's very true. He says, and at the time, the Switch had the 100 horse, the 130, and the 170.
Yeah.
And he says, were we to do this, being cute, and God knows, he knows who he's talking to.
Mm-hmm.
I have the loosest lips in the industry. So when Sea-Doo, Yamaha, Kawasaki tell me something, they know full well it's going to be the next episode of this damn podcast.
Yeah.
All right. I got to get my clicks. So he's telling me information that he's been approved to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be honest here. So I come out and I go, hey, listen, we just had I'm like, here, let me talk about the Switch. Just so you guys know, they have a prototype with a 1630.
I literally remember watching the episode, obviously not live, but I remember watching you talking, and it was the first time that I comprehended the 1630 as opposed to a turbo kit or an E-TEC. Right. Purely because for me, I don't know why, and maybe this is a perceptual thing. Dimensionally, I always perceive the 1630 as just a bigger lump to try and put into a spark. But then when you think about the ancillary componentry that you're messing around with a turbo kit, it kind of makes sense.
Well, now what was interesting, and you may or may not remember this, was prior to BRP reorganizing, Evinrude had the E-TEC. Right. Had the two-stroke E-TEC. And they had the two-stroke E-TEC back in 2012, 2013. And the reason why it was so important was two things happened at the Los Angeles Boat Show back in 2012, in my experience. And I'll share this. And I walked up to the Evinrude booth, and they had a basically like a large aquarium with all the different E-TECs lined up on a board, on a buckboard.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, hey, you want to see something cool? I go, sure. And they pushed a little red button, and the E-TEC 110 or the 190 or whatever the hell it was went whoop and fired up. And I go, whoa. And he goes, what? I go, you're not supposed to run an engine inside of because it's an indoor Los Angeles convention center. And he goes, we're the only engine clean enough to be permitted to run inside.
Yeah.
And I said, get out of here. And he goes, hey, you see that little port right there? I go, yeah. He goes, that's the exhaust port. Put your hand up to it. I put my hand up to it, and I went foot. And it never burned my hand.
Yeah.
And I kept my hand there.
And this is 2012, right?
2012. And this is in just the LA Boat Show. And I sat back and I went, okay, I'm a believer. Like, you convinced me. And when I knew the Spark was coming out in 2013, and we had just launched Watercraft Journal that January 1st of that year, and I had heard about it early. I didn't know it was going to be made out of polypropylene. That was the one thing that blew my mind. But I said, I even published articles. I go, this thing's going to have the E-TEC in it.
Makes sense.
Because it was so lightweight. I mean, Joe, I'm telling you, anyone could deadlift this engine. It was so lightweight, but it was a 2-stroke, and I was like, oh, here we go, boys. Here we go. This is it. And so when 2014 we go to the press intro, I'm standing there with Jerry Gaddis and Scott Frazier, and they bring them up, yellow and pink and white and black, and they bring them up onto the beach. I'm trying to pull the seat off to see what the engine looks like. Of course, you can't. And I pull the side panel off, and I look in there, and I go, it's a snowmobile motor. And they go, yes, the 900. I go, oh, it's not the E-TEC? And they go, oh, no. I said, why not? And they're like, oh, no. We can't do the E-TEC in a personal watercraft. Right. I go, why the hell not? And he goes, whole new EPA regulations. He goes, there's a whole new type. He goes, there's a for applying for American Coast Guard permissions and American EPA regulations, they have to jump through all these hoops and pay all these fines because there's nothing more painful than bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And he says the E-TEC has to stay an outboard for its classification. So I was like, well, shit. I was excited because I thought for sure that engine would end up in a jet ski. So they were stuck with a 4-stroke. So it was interesting, again, going back to 2019 with this engine and him saying, if we do anything, if there's a high performance spark,
when
if speaking politically, it's going to be the 1630 because it's sitting on the shelf. We can pull it off, drop it in. We don't have to change anything. We add a little bit of weight, which helps with ballast, helps with traction, and you got 130 horse. Now, Don't get me wrong. Every guy with a laptop's like, oh my gosh, I can put a 170 on this like that. And that's fine. I'm all for it. But ever since I published that video, every year I've been publicly crucified saying Kevin's full of shit. And I'm like, that's fine. That's okay. Because when you say that I'm a liar, you're also saying Greg Gaddis is a liar because Greg has said the same thing publicly.
Yeah.
And I just kind of laugh. I go, all right, well, that's fair. You made a point, which was great. And it kind of called me out. And that was, they have prototypes of everything. They could have a prototype of Spark running on plutonium for all we care. Whether it'll come to fruition, that's a different story.
You've covered so many interesting points. I'm going to try and remember the key ones that I just want to come back to. So the first one for me is the concept of E-TEC and 2-stroke. I think you're 100% right around the CAF emissions and all of the legislation part of it. But I think there's also more of a perceptional issue whereby if you take that video, for example, that I put out, it obviously generated a lot of conversation, some good, some bad, some enraged and all this stuff. But what came back consistently is people's perception of a E-TEC is a 2-stroke from the 90s. They can't quite fathom that a 2-stroke in 2024, 25 could be exponentially different to what we know as a 2-stroke from the past. So I think that's equally something that Sea-Doo would have been considering within their marketing department, which is actually 4-stroke is the perception of the future, the reliability and everything else that goes with it. As soon as you talk about E-TEC and 2-stroke and all that sort of stuff, you're then also fighting that battle where it's a re-education piece. So that was something that I wanted to just say on the E-TEC side of things. The point around it being a prototype and will it happen and all this sort of stuff. I think interestingly, because I get really nerdy with what's actually probably happening here. And I think Sea-Doo are posturing and positioning their models in such a fashion whereby if you think about, which by the way, you did a great video on it because I was very interested in potentially buying one of these. So the GTR X300 Polytech 2 hull, anyone that's rode a GTI will know the Polytech 2 is as loose a hull you're going to get in a bigger size craft. I think you actually said in your critique of the GTR, I think you said it was very reminiscent of that philosophy from the 90s. You're 100% right in the sense that is a bigger hole inherently, so you have to work harder at getting that ass to flick around and stuff. But what I think is happening is Sea-Doo have gone from saying, well, we've got a GTR and a 230 supercharged versus the naturally aspirated 170. They've pushed their high performance crafts to 325. So what they're trying to do is reduce conflicts of interest as in their model. So if you're a GTI rider, naturally, if they were to use a 1630, you would have it capped at a 130, which is fine in my opinion, because this is the other part that always plays out within the comments and what Sea-Doo are probably keeping an eye on. People get really overzealous and crazy with their expectation of what the Spark should or could do. In my opinion, the Spark just needs to hit 60. That's the sweet spot where I think that ski needs to be. It doesn't need to be 65. It doesn't need to go ridiculous. It just needs to be a 60-mile-an-hour machine, you know? And that's what's happening at the moment. I think Sea-Doo are posturing and moving all of their models in such a fashion that if they were to hypothetically slot in a faster Spark, which I'll come on to what I think that could be, it's not going to inherently make people think, oh, well, actually, we have the GTR or we have the GTI. It starts to become a bit more of a philosophy. Well, actually, no, they're going up in horsepower rating. Right. So you're still not threatened, because all of this stuff, right, is about if you're out with your buddies and you're having, everyone drag races. That's the nature of having a PWC. Everyone wants the quickest craft on the water. No, you have this like split audience, right? You have your high performance riders, which I would classify as the people that want ultimate speed, ultimate performance. And then you have your absolute enthusiasts that love connection with the water, a machine that is closely connected to the water. And there's the disparity is that the high performance craft riders don't want to concede that these small lightweight machines could be performance monsters. And the lightweight riders don't want to concede that actually the performance in these performance machines is what we all desire. So it's Sea-Doo are fighting against what I believe is model confusion and tiering issues.
Okay, I would concede with all that. I think you present a really good argument. I'm coming at it from a very different angle, and I think we touched on it prior to going live. And I'm of the conceit that like the mines of Moria, we've dug too deep.
Yeah.
And that we've gone too far. And I even joked with you that I feel very guilty having been in this position and a journalistic position and being a professional cheerleader for this industry.
So were you one of the individuals campaigning for Bluetooth speakers? Is that what you're saying?
I'll tell you this. I was the first to go to bat for IBR. 100%, I was the first to go to bat for IBR. And I was a vociferous ally of the GPS calibrated speedometers.
Right.
Sound systems, excuse me. Sound systems I could live without, but I did believe that the first edition of the speakers that Sea-Doo came out with in 2018 immediately synced to your phone. Your phone went in a glove box with a cord, and I was like, this is easy. I think this is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an advocate. Then by 2020, when they had the split text screen and you had to have the app, and then the cord wouldn't work well with the USB port, and and I was like, oh, I've created a monster. And there's an old Ernest Hemingway quote that he said, a character is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he says, progressively and then all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that we were progressing to a point, and then it went Fish Pro Apex. And I went, oh no, what happened?
Yeah, no.
And not that the Fish Pro Apex is a terrible machine. I'm not saying that, but it is
Just a quick interjection there. The word apex should never be associated with a fishing model. Just so you know my stance on it.
Well, I will tell you that the apex, by your definition, was woefully misused on the previous model for which it was named.
Yeah.
The RXPX 300 Apex was certainly not the apex when the very next year the 325 came out with all of the features now standard. It's like,
also quickly just on this, because I'm not as massively tuned into riding the T3s. What is the setup difference with the chimes and stuff on the new RXP? So people were actually telling me recently that the old pre-325 to the current 325, the hull's slightly different, right?
No. The hull received minor changes in 2021.
Right. Okay.
It received far better sculpting around the intake grate, and just because to really allow the ingress around the intake grate. In fact, if you look, there is a lot of similarities in the hull shaping around the intake grate. That reminds me of the early teardrop shape intake of the FZR, FZS Yamahas.
Right. Okay.
That being said, they also introduced this they gimmickly called it the shark gills. But what they did is that they broke up the mid chine and they serrated it. Okay. And the reason they serrated it, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a gimmick. But what they did do was that it actually broke up the bonding surface, so that as you were on the rail making a wide sweep, not so much a hairpin, but in a wide sweep, they broke up that surface, and that allowed because previous the T3 versus the T3R hull hated sweeps, and it would jerk and it would buck a little bit because it was trying to grab and drag and whip that ski around. By serrating it, they allowed it to do a really good sweeper. But the hull for the 325 is completely and totally unchanged.
Got it.
And I have not seen anything to tell me that the intake grate or sponsons are any different as well. Because we were not told they were different, and I have not seen any sort of part number that would supersede the outgoing or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So the only changes were powertrain, ECU, fuel system, and the hydraulic damper steering system.
Right.
So, but getting to my point that I'm very easily distracted, and I apologize.
Likewise. It's very easy when you're talking about skis to go down a rabbit hole.
But I felt that we have catered so far to and literally catered to a specific audience that specific audience has intentionally steered our industry.
Yeah.
And this is a cash rich, cash flush, baby boomer, sexagenarian audience. All right. On paper, every dealer will say the average buyer is 52 years old. But a lot of times what is happening is the buyer is not the same person on paper as the one who is financing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of dealers are going, hey, we're going to buy, a lot of dealers are seeing grandparents coming in and going, oh, we're buying this for the kids because we want them to bring the grandkids to the lake house. And Sea-Doo Media literally said, the people who buy the skis are not the ones who ride them. Mm-hmm. I go, okay, break that one down for me like I'm 5 years old. And they explained, they said, we are seeing a majority of people who are financing or buying it themselves who may use it as a status symbol, but more often than not, they're using it to lure the family in for riding. Okay, that's fine. Great. It's a family toy. They're $20,000. They're $25,000. You know, God help us, they're $30,000 in Australia by the time they show up in a container. And what it's done in ballooning our sizing, ballooning the features, and swelling these watercraft into the vessels that they are, it has excluded an audience who built this industry.
Yeah.
Joe, do you mind me asking you a personal question? How old are you?
Guess.
I think you're 34.
I'm 31.
You're 31. Okay. Okay. Well, 31 is 10 years younger than the average buyer in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. 94,
right.
95, they were looking at 21 to 24-year-olds buying these things.
Yeah.
You and I talked about 1995. 1995 was the apex, was the pinnacle year for watercraft sales at 146,000 units. This year, we're going to do just over 50,000 units.
It would be criminal not to interject at that point as well, because for me, this fascinates me. I was born in 93, so a lot of people will affirm to me. So I have a 1995 717. I haven't been able to find the full fat 787 yet. I'm still looking for a clean one. Talk to me about the 95.5, because this mythical what happened in 95 always fascinates me. So you have obviously the 717, which is the actual model that was released for 95. And then late into 95, you see this, what people call the 95.5, which was the non-mirrored hood race beast 787 RAV. And obviously the 96 introduced the mirrors. What was the deal in 95?
Okay.
Why would we have two?
All right. So 1991 is the first year the IGSBA, the International Jet Ski Boat Association, the IGSBA brings sit-downs onto the race course. Much to the chagrin of the stand-up racers. This had the IGSBA since 2000. Since 1990 or 1984. Holy God, I can't believe I'm getting my dates this wrong. In 1984, we go from the USJSBA to the IJSBA.
Yeah.
In 84. From 84 to 91, it's all, well, actually, from 74, 75 when the USJSBA. 75 is when Chris and his brother started it. Crap. I want to say 75. So we go 9 years USJSBA. 84 to 91, we go 7 years. All stand-ups. Nothing but stand-ups. Sea-Doo comes out in 88 with a sit-down. And we're not talking 1968, 1969 with the little fart around the pond. Sort of.
Jacobson, is it right? The guy who went on to actually be Kawasaki's, stand-up guru.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sold the design to Kawasaki. Kawasaki built it. And by the way, the first stand-ups, those two-stroke engines were the bilge pumps for their large container ships. That's where they got them from. They had them sitting on a shelf. They're like, we got a Marinized two-stroke. This is perfect. Makes 28 horsepower. Throw it in. Yeah. So 1991 is the first runabout racing. 92, they start to alter the track. All right. 92, 93, lightning strikes. It is huge. 92, Vanilla Ice is racing professionally.
Yeah, I actually saw a River Rapid documentary not so long ago where he was with, I think it was with, let me try and remember the name of the racer that was with. It was a girl and it was another racer, and they were trying to go up and down the rapids on a stand-up. Kawasaki, I think it was. And that didn't make any sense to me, but he was racing for a period, right?
Yes. He was, well, Robert, his real name, Robert Van Winkle. Robert was actually very accomplished dirt bike motocross racer.
Right. Okay.
But he lived in Florida, and Florida, of course, caught fire with the jet ski market. And he's like, well, I want to get on this.
I think it was Victor Sheldon. The name just came to me. I'm sure that was the guy that was in the documentary with him.
Yeah, creator of the leg drag.
Yeah.
Victor Sheldon, yeah.
But a great documentary. There's some really cool footage in that one. But where you're going with that is that's where the race series was starting to explode, right?
Right. And so what had happened by 95, and we watched just it escalate. People were cash flush. The watercraft were just abysmally cheap, and because they were frills free. Most of them didn't even have a reserve tank because you had a little switch for a reserve tank, and many of them they just started having lanyard kill switches that had because Kawasaki up until I want to say 92, if you fell off, it would just idle in a circle, and then you would have to basically let it hit you, and you grab on and get up on it. Yamaha had the runabout, the first Wave Raider and Wave Runner in 87. And then 88 was the first Sea-Doos. And by 92, 93, we're starting to see the momentum. Now, I want to say it was before the Budweiser tour. I think it was the Budweiser tour. It was the Bud tour. National tour was massive. International racing was catching on, and it was reaching a crescendo by 95.
Right.
What you're talking about is Sea-Doo's foray in making a sport class specific watercraft,
right,
that could go from the floor to the racetrack like that.
Right. Okay.
So that's why I didn't have mirrors. That's why I didn't have anything. It was stripped down because the racers don't want this. So they're showing up and they're pulling parts off, and the manufacturer's going like, well, what if we just make a ski for these guys? And that was the operation behind it. Consequently, there's been lots of watercraft that have been birthed out of that. Mm-hmm. But that's to your point, was that 95 XP.
And they were really low quantities, right? Because I'm still trying to find a 95.5, but they're here in the UK they're non-existent. I think I see some 96s because obviously they're limited, but the 95.5s are just so rare.
Right.
Obviously loads of them were raced and modded. So yeah, it's a bit of a mission, but you don't see a ton of them around.
But again, it was a purpose-built machine. So, I mean, being a purpose-built machine, the people who bought it for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I hate to say it, it's like, I'm gonna be crude, but it's like the girl who gets real pretty in high school. By the time you see her when she's 30, you're like, oh, she's got some miles on her. But yeah, in that sense, those skis were all beat up. They were all raced. They were all. So if you can find one, you're gonna pay a finder's fee, and you're probably gonna have to ship it over.
Yeah. It will happen at some point. It will happen for sure. More likely a 96. But I digress. The X4 hull, I think, is where we're going with this, which is the similarities of obviously what the Spark became and the inspiration of 2014.
Well, the Spark hull is an HX.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, if you roll them over, almost dimensionally identical, except for width. And
so that's interesting. You'd say the Spark was more akin to the HX than the X4?
Yes, they told me so.
Okay, that's interesting because the HX, from what I've seen, so I'm restoring one at the moment. I've not had
roll over. Tell me if I'm wrong, because all I know is what the media relations told us when the Spark came out in 2014. They said we literally cut up an HX.
That's cool. I know,
like,
obviously,
get out of here.
the biggest characteristic difference is how aggressive the sponsons are, obviously, on the Spark. And that's why a lot of people end up taking the sponsons off of the Spark to get it to be more slippery.
Right.
But it's quite ironic. So I was talking to one of my followers who's an absolute 90s nut, and he was saying that in the 90s, everyone was trying to do everything to their X4 to get it to be like a Spark. And now Spark riders are doing everything they can, myself included, to get it to be like an X4. So it's just that full circle that you wish and wish and wish to get something, it then arrives, and then you're kind of like trying to reverse engineer it, which I find was fascinating. I've not actually taken the sponsors off mine yet, but apparently it really does wake up that playful characteristic of the ski.
What I think what your channel touches on, and what makes your heart tick, is something that is unique within our industry. And I have said this much to the grimace of a lot of manufacturers, and that is the one difference between a personal watercraft and classic cars, classic trucks, motorcycles, is that people tend to have an emotional bond with this was my grandpa's motorcycle, or this was my dad's truck, or this is the car that I had in high school and I'm going to die with it, or whatever.
Yeah.
And there is an emotional bond with that machine. And I said, the one thing that all of you, and I screamed this at Kawasaki, was I said, because I raced for them and I know the guys really well. And I said, you are doing an absolutely piss poor job of mining your mile deep, 10 mile deep brand value, and extracting the value in the raw earth minerals that are the rare earth minerals that's within your legacy. And if they touch on it, it's kind of a milk toast. Like the first JetBlaster. And I said, well, why didn't you call it Wave Blaster? You're so close. You took it right to the end, right to the very end, and then you dropped the ball.
My theory video on the JetBlaster, and why I said, like, just lean in more to your heritage. It's there. It's almost like we're going to dip a toe, but we're going to do it cautiously because we're scared. There is a huge cult following with obviously the B1s. I don't have a B1. I don't have a B1 yet, and I think the fear that maybe their marketing team have is that, like, we're going to piss off a load of people if we make a new gen big, because it is big comparatively to a B1.
Certainly,
let's face it. But the reality is I don't get it. It's a problem for both Sea-Doo and Yamaha. They don't lean into their heritage enough. It's almost like they shy away from this tremendous story arc, which got them to this point. I mean, if you think about Sea-Doo, it blows my mind. Someone who's in marketing, graphics, you never see any homage material. You never see any, like throwback material, which, like when you think about the 325 in the full circle innovation of, how it's got to where it's got, nothing. I think when I saw the 325, I know everyone hates this machine, but I personally like it. XPDI 0304, the 325 aesthetically, that red, lava red, is basically a cut carbon copy of that machine, and there's no link to the past almost. So I think 100%, you're 100% right, Kevin. They should have called it the Wave Blaster. That drives me crazy, and there is a lot to discuss around the JetBlaster and what I like about it. Most notably the fact that they've introduced tiering again, which I think is really important. When you introduce tiering within a model, you enable this philosophy again of why you buy into a certain model versus the other, which I think for so long, the stagnation with Sea-Doo has been you had the 60, the 90, the Trixx, and there was no real kick on. So I think I actually said that in one of my videos. You had the 2014 Spark Innovation, 2017, I want to say, was the Trixx. And then since then, apart from the facelift that we had in 24, which I'm probably overly critical of the facelift and obviously what they prioritized. They prioritized, again, to your point, the mods and cons, the waterproof storage, the link queue system. I do like the engine access. That's obviously a good addition, because for someone who rides in the salt, it drives me insane that you're expected to wash down your engine bay with a little square rectangular hatch on the side. That's all good. But I think where I was going with that is there's not been this like kick on since the Trixx in terms of rider.
What's the next step?
Yeah, what are we getting next? And for me, I would almost concede. So when people ask me, Joe, you want a faster spark, but you don't evaluate the fact that the Trixx at the moment is inherently water wheelies, donuts, jumping some waves. It's not a performance top end speed. Well, I said, well, just remove the Trixx badge and let's introduce an XP badge, for example, reduce the VTS range of motion. People would cry about that. I know they would, because they'd say, well, I still want the full range of motion. Just dial it down slightly, but give us more top end and market it as more of the buoy, race machine that takes away some of the tricks. I think that's almost cool. So you have your base level smart, like what JetBlaster have just done, the blue and black one. And then you have your Trixx, and then you have your performance machine. I just don't see why the Sea-Doo department haven't seen that as a weakness in that particular model. That's kind of my concern as a long-standing Sea-Doo fan, if you like. Some people call me a fanboy because I love the brand, and to the detriment of kind of dying on the hill with it sometimes. And with the JetBlaster coming out, I think it only sparks, excuse the pun, the Sea-Doo are going to have to react. That's my personal sentiment. I don't think you can.
100%.
I don't think you can continue to say, well, we've done this facelift, which, by the way, is massively split opinion. Some people love the new aesthetic. Some people, hate it, and some people, like myself, I'm kind of in the middle. So I have a 91 XP, right? And if you think about the 91 XP, the pink, the purple, and the green, it was very boxy. It was very primitive, not particularly refined. We think of them when it kicked on to the green and then the nice flowing mirrors. It got a lot softer, right? So my designer, like putting my designer hat on for a second, I recognize that what Sea-Doo have done here is they've refined. If you look at this Gen 2 variation of the Spark, what they've done here is they've softened the edges out.
Correct.
And as much as it's lost some of that, what I perceived is fighter pilot futuristic look on the Gen 1, it's kind of what they did in the 90s. And I realized that after I made a critique video saying, I hate it, I don't like it. And then I was like, well, actually, Joe, you're being unfair here, because in 93, 94, 95, compared to the Gen 1 XP, it was like chalk and cheese in terms of how they smoothed it out. So I could get on board with this, but only, the caveat to that is if we have the comparable performance to go along with it. Riding one of these, as someone who likes to ride aggressively and spin these and fall off, the one thing I will massively concede is the gunwale area where you climb back on. Shin-wise, getting back on is massively improved. So the amount of shin bruises you get on the Gen 1, because it's literally it's a harsh chamfer. That's a great addition. I just wish my romantic idea was that for that anniversary date last year, we were going to get the facelift model, which was great. They did a great job with the mods. But then just to go mic drop the performance, and then the JetBlaster becomes a non-point,
Right.
But they didn't do that. So I think JetBlaster have had this leverage now to say, like, look at this. And you are seeing a lot of Sea-Doo fans that are looking at that TR1 engine and thinking, well, could I prospectively mod that to get me somewhere near 60, more so than sticking with the 900A? So you spoke about turbo kits a little bit earlier in this call. I actually seriously looked into turbo kits because I was like, I'm getting so fed up. I've got a Spark. I just can't deal with doing 52, 53 on glass. That's just not quick enough. And the reason why I say it's not quick enough is weekends while I'm riding my GSX Limited 951 and doing 63, 65, depending on conditions, there's a huge disparity of riding machine to that level and then coming back to a Spark, even if you can do wheelies, even if it is lighter, and even if you can jump waves and it's all that great stuff. So I think that's why people are now looking at the JetBlaster thinking, well, actually, if it's got that extended range of ETS, it's got the foot wedges, obviously, it's got the adjustable riser, it's got all of the things that we associate with a Trixx model, and we know we can mod that more effortlessly. It could be problematic for Sea-Doo.
Well, okay. There's a couple things, and I really want to drive kind of my conscious point, and I hopefully it'll answer a few of your questions, or at least to your point. my belief is, or my question is, why was 1995 such a pinnacle year?
Mm-hmm.
And why are the OEs proverbially chasing the tail of that dragon to this day?
Yeah.
We have a couple things that can't be replicated. We had very low very low legislation that was, very low restrictions. You could take it, if it was wet, you could push a ski into it and you could ride in there. Now that's not the case. And that's fine. I understand the skis are heavier. I get that. We can't have a 2-stroke. We got to go with a 4-stroke. That's fine, but that does make for a heavier platform because you have to have oil, you have to have water cooling, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Then we look at cost of entry. All right, well, there's not a lot of 25-year-olds who have expendable income who are going to drop $10, $12, $15, $20,000 on a jet ski. They're going to go, I need a car, or I need to get into an apartment, or I need to find a job. So unfortunately, the environment is such that the economic environment is such that it's not conducive to making a purchase of this caliber.
Agreed.
Fine. So we have in 95, we had a confluence of all these very, very favorable conditions. And today we don't have those. Now, interestingly enough, in 2014, the Spark from 2014 to 2017 was absolutely astronomically one of the best sellers that they had. I mean, it outsold everything.
Yeah.
And Yamaha was left with their pants down. They were just like, so they had to hurry and make an EX. And the EX was a very conservative answer to the Spark. And it was kind of
Did you like the old promo videos that I dug out in my video?
Yes. Oh, it was perfect. Oh, Lord, it was so perfect because it was just the outward vitriol that Yamaha had for the Polytech. And, it's not stable, and it's going to be wet, and it's going to be this, and it's made out of plastic, and, we don't do that. And, of course, for them to later do that is...
Where do you sit on that, Kevin? So I think moralistically, I'm not going to get into too much of like, they did this. Where do you sit on it? It's kind of, for me, it's if I was part of that launch team and marketing team, I'd be very, very aware of previous how can that happen?
Here's the problem.
You essentially
I know the people who made those decisions, and they don't care about personal watercraft. They're wine aficionados, and they're
wine aficionados.
They go to wine clubs and they go to the Ritz-Carlton in Georgia and go golfing, and they don't, as long as Yamaha is in the black, and people are buying it, they don't care. There's no enthusiasts in there who are former racers or former athletes or former race team members. They're just like, I have an engineering degree. Okay, you want to work on jet skis? Okay. And they go and they hire a 28-year-old kid or a 26-year-old right out of CAD school, and he goes and he starts working. Okay, and that's great.
What do you think, Kevin? What do you make of it? Essentially, them doing in my opinion, a virtual carbon copy of the Sea-Doo Spark philosophy.
Okay, well, there's knowing who was involved. I can't name names, but let's just say a very famous Yamaha racer who happens to have teenage sons who race. They got their hands on the early prototypes, and they had influence.
Right.
And they kept saying, make it lighter, make it faster, make it lighter, make it faster. And they kept pushing. And this is what I've been told. I might be, for all I know, I might be regurgitating lies. But what I've been told is that certain people who are enthusiasts and are racers, they came in and said, you guys don't have anything that appeals to me.
Yeah.
And they went, well, wait a minute. And they're like, well, we have the GP. And they're like, yeah, that's great. I'm already racing that. And that's an $18,000, $19,000 ski. I can't buy that. My dad has to buy that for me. So what happens is that the JetBlaster, everything Yamaha does, it goes through several filters. First, it goes through legal. Legal's number one. Their legal department is airtight. Number two, it's got to go through their environmental 2025 or environmental 2030 plan, which I did a big 2.5-hour video on. And they're beholden to that. All right. Their shareholders are like, we are delivering on our environmental plan for 2030. And what that means is that power to weight ratio is one metric, and then they have to measure that metric with emissions.
Right. Okay.
And all right, so we got a really good power to weight ratio, but what's our emissions look like? So suddenly they go, all right, well, how do we cut the weight out of this EX? And they go, well, there's one way, but you're not going to like it. And they go Polytech. Or it's not Polytech, it's polypropylene. But they go polypropylene. And believe you me, there were people eating plates full of crow when they made that decision. This was not one of these charge forward, boys. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do the spark and do it better. This was a decision that was like, all right, let's go forward. It's gonna work. It'll be fine. It's gonna be successful. But there's humility there. Someone's hubris was put on the table.
Yeah.
But again, you're talking to people who emotionally, the brass, they emotionally don't care.
Yeah.
So it could be made out of orange and banana peels as far as they care, as long as it sells.
Yeah.
So it's a harsh thing to say, because it's like I want to sit there and point fingers and go, well, that guy made that decision and that guy made that decision and that person influenced that decision. But they're people. And when you know the people and you go, oh no.
And I think the truth is, from the people I've spoken to, at least, that are on the Yamaha side in terms of brand loyalty, they're just, thank the Lord that we now have our equivalent, because I just don't want to deal with Sea-Doo. I don't want to have a Sea-Doo product, but I want the characteristics of a Sea-Doo Spark. So I think they're just over the moon. They don't,
and rightfully so.
And not a lot of people equally. I actually got some funny comments on this as well. They didn't know those commercial existed. It was almost like it was part of Yamaha's master script to always do polypropylene. It's only when you actually uncover the well. I had to dig for those videos.
Oh, they're buried.
Yeah,
I'm so glad. I am so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how glad I am that you brought that up. Now, I will say one thing about Yamaha, and that Yamaha reacts. They don't lead, they react.
Yeah, one of the leading dealers here in the UK said that to me a few years ago, and it's stuck with me. He said Yamaha are reactive, and they'll normally watch what Sea-Doo do. They'll take 2 or 3 years more. They'll perfect it. They'll bring out their equivalent, and that's the way that they move forward. And obviously, you can clearly see that that's the case.
And they do cherry pick. They'll say, okay, well, what do we like here, and what do we like here, and what don't we like, and what are we going to do different, and how are we going to differentiate ourselves from here, and blah 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 blah. And that's fine. And that's competition. All right, that's great. I mean, you can't look at the new Corvette and say, oh, that was created in a vacuum. Absolutely not. They looked at every supercar. They looked at every Ferrari. They looked at every Lamborghini. They looked at every supercar that was on the market, and they said, how do we make our Bowling Green, Kentucky, American-made sports car into one of those? So not every artist stands on the shoulders of giants, and that's fine. I think we're all okay with that.
And the truth is, Kevin, as much as I can see the obvious design cues stolen, I can't wait to jump on one, because for me personally, I'm a realist in the sense that if that thing is as playful, it's tunable to get it near it where it needs to be, I would happily. I mean, what I would say as a caveat to that is, I do have this romantic idea of a full circle arc of an XP, and I feel like I would be massively pissed if I jumped and then Sea-Doo finally did pull the trigger and do it.
Right.
It's just the time, isn't it? It's how long are the Sea-Doo Spark Riders going to hold out on a? And this is like I want to touch on. Of course, I've cut you up a little bit there, so I know.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
One thing I really want to touch on this call is there's this huge discrepancy between the way that the Spark is perceived versus what a true riding enthusiast thinks about the Spark. So let's break this down. So if you think about the Sea-Doo Spark, inherently it was designed initially to get the cost point down and to be that lower barrier to entry to PWCs, as you touched on. And in truth, it does that, or it did that. And then there's the second part to it, that anyone that truly rides the Spark correctly, and when I say correctly, I kind of preface that with not trying to be antagonistic to people that necessarily think they ride it correctly, but ride it aggressively, maximize the capability of it. And there's lots of ways to maximize the capability of riding a Spark, whether it's a course, wave jumping, spinning, whatever it might be, wheelies. The people that are riding it that way, given a 60-mile-an-hour power plant, I think it would be an absolute true performance machine. And I think that the problem is at the moment is your RXP riders, or they look at the Spark as this toy, this throwaway product that's, it's the entry level. And what's happening is that's playing into this narrative whereby Sea-Doo, I believe, are reluctant to, endorse this romantic idea that people like myself, and there's a lot of people like me that are riding the Sparks, see the Spark as a performance machine. And I don't know if they're confident enough in seeing the Spark as a performance machine. And that's one thing that I think people massively misunderstand when they look at the Spark. I get so many comments where people say, oh, you want to go faster? Buy a GTI. And they just don't get that when you ride a GTI the same way as trying to ride a Spark, it will do some of the things that a Spark will do, but it inherently won't do it to the same effectiveness. So it's trying to communicate with those individuals that, like, a Spark is the only lightweight, well, apart from the JetBlaster, which might well be the same, is the only true lightweight playful machine that will do exactly input-wise what you want it to do time and time again. And when I say input-wise, we touched on this before the call actually started. Compliance to me is killing PWCs. And when I say compliance for your viewers, it's ergo lock. It's things that essentially, when you ride a ski, you feel like Tom Cruise, Top Gun, you're invincible. And for me, that's good. But after a while, when you're on autopilot, you're not being asked questions. And when you're not asked questions, it becomes predictable. And predictability, I believe, gets quite boring quite quickly. So I believe compliance needs to be reduced and performance needs to be increased. People need to get thrown off skis more. People need to have to learn how to ride these skis more. Whether that's going to happen is the question. Because Sea-Doo, I don't think, want people to get thrown off skis. Sea-Doo want people to go touring. People want to have their fishing equipment on the back. People want their Link Q systems. So I'm kind of like flogging a dead horse in that regard. But combination of compliance and the people seeing the Spark as just an entry-level ski, which it is, but not as a performance machine. They're the two critical issues at the moment, which I think is constituting I can't help but just staring at sand right now. It's antagonizing me.
It's
go,
beige.
Kevin, go.
Taupe is very soothing.
Yeah, I honestly, when I saw
I did this on purpose. I'm almost trolling you by doing this. But
they're just sand. Yeah, and then obviously you compare that to the offering at the moment, which what I will still say is the Pro variant of the JetBlaster is still too pastel for me personally.
Okay.
I like more punchy, as in if you look at a Pantone chart for colors, pastel colors are like soft, they're friendly, they're warm. It's all great. It's a bit cuddly. It's a bit soft.
Right.
You want aggression. You want your blur pools. You want your real punchy color palettes. And I think that would have taken that to like a 10 out of 10 for me. But aesthetically, what to me looks like an aluminium flow piece, which goes by the side gunwales on the JetBlaster. I saw that. Yeah. For me, aesthetically, that is a beautiful component to that, how it flows from the front down through. I think there's some really nice design components to this JetBlaster, which, being objective, I think differentiates it, at least aesthetically. So a lot of people put these side to side, more so the base level one, Kevin. So if you look at the base level JetBlaster and the previous, so that one there, and if you look at the 2023, I believe it is, blue Spark, base level Spark, they almost look in, a carbon copy. But if you get past that and you look at the Pro variant, I believe the Pro variant has some real individual qualities, which at least reduce some of this notion that they've essentially just copied the Spark. Because the Pro, if you're being objective, aesthetically, has got a lot of different things going on it.
Certainly.
I'm making an argument here for the marketing team of the Yamaha, but where I'm going with this is it would be unfair and hypercritical to say that this is identical to the Trixx, because there are just things on this which look really, really nice. Like, for example, the inset, I'm hoping, I've not actually tactile felt this, the plastic bumpers, to me, I'm hoping that there's actually a different material change tactility wise with those actual bumper pieces, versus, for me, it's always looked a bit samey on the Spark, that you have the predominant black Polytech and then pops of color. To me here, we're seeing a higher predominance. Obviously, it's helped with the fact that they're not using a Polytech polypropylene underneath hull, which I think you actually corrected me on in my video. That I thought it was fiberglass. I believe I think you put in
there's two hulls. And in fact, Greg Gaddis and when we went over the Yamahas, I said we went over the weights and the weight differences. The Pro, the 2-seater and the 3-seater Pro, is made out of Nano XL, not Nano 2, but Nano 1.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them appear to be just traditional SMC fiberglass.
And there's something that hopefully we can put straight now. What was the issue with Yamaha? Because obviously, like I said, I'm not a massive Yamaha guy. There was this issue with automotive spray paint or something. And people were saying, Yamaha still going to have this issue. And I've kind of clickbaited people into those comments. But what is the deal? Is this going to have these same automotive issues?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't expect this Leopard to change its spots.
What's happened? They've simply, to get the cost point down, they've moved across to just automotive.
Okay. I want to say it must have been 2000. It must have been 2014 or 15 when Yamaha decided to change from gel coat on its hulls to automotive grade paint.
Right.
And I thought it was a PPG brand paint. And I toured the facility. In fact, I did a really lengthy article on the magazine.
Right.
Because I couldn't do video there. That was verboten.
Yeah, of course.
But I could take still photos. And so I took a bunch of still photos of the whole manufacturing process. And we actually got to watch some base model EX models go through from beginning to end. So that was kind of fun. And when all the watercraft deck and hull come through, they're painted with automated arms, these robotic arms that come through, and they do, a couple passes of color. Then they do a coat of clear, and they're shot like a car. They're shot like an automobile.
See, that would just terrify me. And this is kind of a point that I've been trying to educate people with. So when I endorsed the Spark, so we haven't actually touched on this. So I was 2-stroke everything for a long, long time. I actively fought against buying a Spark. I eventually conceded and bought one, and I've really enjoyed it, is the truth. But in that process, a lot of real usages that I've ran into have been great. So, for example, although Sea-Doo say you shouldn't do it, yet they put it in all their promo photos, never beach a Sea-Doo, yet every promo image, the ski's beached.
Right.
Polytech is super scratch resistant because it starts inherently, without sounding brutalistic, pretty naff to start with, right? It's dull. It's got all the grain of the plastic recycled material in there.
It's textured. It's rough.
Yeah. So if you beach a spark, and I'm not talking about for anyone saying, "Oh, Joe beaches like riding up." I'm talking about just pulling it onto the beach when you're going to have a drink with your buddies or whatnot. In that practice, real world usage, I would pick Polytech over an automotively sprayed hull, because what's going to happen if you had your car and you had sand and you were progressively over time rubbing the underside of your hull, what's going to happen? And this is very true, because buddies that have had Yamahas in recent years explain that exact same thing. They're buffing them, they're cutting, polishing them like a traditional painted surfaces. So in my opinion, I actually said this in my JetBlaster video, I think they're posturing Yamaha, and eventually, so I've got the actual numbers in front of me because I knew you might have brought this up. The JetBlaster is 244 in kilos, and the Spark is around 190. So there's still a weight discrepancy there. And there's some people, Yamaha fans, will say, oh, it's only a small amount, but weight is everything, right? When you're jumping these skis and you're wheeling these skis, every bit of weight counts. So I think in the long run, they will go full plastic, which everyone thinks I'm crazy. But the truth is to get that ultimate playful ski, you said you were shocked in 2014 they went plastic, and I can see why, right? But now it's like the philosophy, I think, associated with the lightweight playful ski. Whether that needs to change if we get a 1630 for the extra stringers and the Polytech 2 style enforcement because of the elasticity in the hull. But I think that plastic is inherently the DNA of those style machines. And going top deck plastic, again, to me, is non-committal. It's like we're committing, but we're not fully committing. And I think that is going to be something that we see strategically will be the next phase of Yamaha, I believe.
Question. Do the Yamaha Wave Runners have a brake?
Say that again.
Do any Yamaha Wave Runners come equipped with a brake?
I would assume so. I mean, I don't ride them. I would assume so, that you've got your equivalent to the IBR system.
Yes, they have ride.
Right. Okay.
The left-handed trigger that you see on like the full-size runabouts and stuff like that. But if you, and it's a brake to you and me, but if you ask Yamaha, oh no, it's a deceleration. It's a deceleration.
Right. I see where you're going with this. I mean, the reality. Go on.
Well, and I'm being cute, and I apologize for being coy with this, but the hull being fiberglass, SMC fiberglass, is them thumbing their nose just a little bit and saying we're better because of blank.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
It's literally a PR move. It's public relations. Would they benefit from being a Polytech hull? Absolutely. Yeah. Would they cut the weight out of it? Oh, could you imagine? You know, if it had 110 horse and you had a Polytech hull, oh, dude, it'd wipe the floor with the Spark.
Yeah.
But they cannot lose face that much.
Yeah, but we don't disagree on anything, but I would disagree in this instance that by going a Polytech, well, I can't say Polytech, people tell me off.
Yeah,
a polypropylene top deck. In my way of thinking, you've already pulled your pants
already opened the door.
You've already pulled your pants down. You've already done that first part of the process. Go full hog, be committed. And it almost just flip it the other way around and say, well, yes, so what? We've done our equivalent. We think it's better. People are going to ride it. I think, is it the Green Hulk Garage? He's saying that the JetBlaster from when he's rode it is just a Spark Dominator. It's
Greg at Green Hulk. Yes.
So I guess where I'm going with this is just commit all the way. Commit all the way by next year for 26. Call it the Wave Blaster. Make it full plastic and bring back the. So we didn't touch on this. You know, the first year they brought the JetBlaster in, it was like a teal and yellow, but it had retro graffiti style graphics, which I think is quintessentially 90s. Everything in the 90s was Sharpie, marker pens, graffiti style graphic. What I think that does is it brings out our inner child. It almost makes you feel like it's like a toy. So I think they nailed it. And then they dropped that. The next year they went to blue, their traditional color, and then it just obviously bring back those colors, call it a wave blaster, make it full plastic. And if Sea-Doo don't do a Spark X, then it dominates.
I have a little bit to go with that, because you're right. And it's interesting. Sea-Doo, corporate, the people inside of corporate. And when I throw out a brand like Sea-Doo or Yamaha, I really need – I am failing in communication, because I need to be more specific in who – there's people that I'm talking about.
Of course, yeah.
So Sea-Doo corporate, the corporate culture is a little bit more bold, and they're a little bit more like, let's let it all hang out. And let's get the product out quick, and let's gauge audience, and we can course correct as it's out.
Yeah.
Yamaha is far more conservative in this manner. Secondly, Yamaha's rudder that steers the whole ship is dealer feedback.
Okay.
And that dealer feedback, that is why the first JetBlaster that you talked about came into existence. And it came into existence because people kept coming into a Yamaha dealer going, hey, do you have a Spark Trixx? My kids want to ride a Trixx. And they go, we have an EX over here. And they're like, I don't want to. That's not a Trixx. And they're like, well, the EXR is the performance model. And they go, no, I don't want to put my grandkid on a race ski. He wants to do wheelies.
So just quickly, I have an interesting segue to that.
Okay.
Here in the UK, sadly, it's now gone now, and I'm not going to name drop too much, but there was a dealership called Watercraft World, and the owner, Nigel, he was one of the rarities here in the UK that had Sea-Doo and Yamaha in his dealership, and he actively made a point of if a user came in. My dad was actually a perfect case study for this. So going back a year and a half ago, my dad's now riding a California Green RXT, but in the dealership, he actually sat on the equivalent Yamaha and the equivalent Sea-Doo, and that in itself, just fit and finish before he'd even looked at was enough for him to affirm his choice. So that's the first part. But the second part is that exact scenario that you've just touched on. What would happen is a customer would come in and say, I want a Spark, and they would say, show me the equivalent, and he would show a JetBlaster, obviously when the years permitted. Right. But that was a huge USP for him, because what he was able to do is to allow consumers to decide aesthetically, fit and finish, and then obviously the specs on top of that. The issue with that, and I don't want to talk out of turn here, but I believe that was a huge issue for him with the dealers, the manufacturers constantly pushing and pulling him, because they hate it. They don't want that competitive comparison in front of a consumer. They want one or the other. And for many years, I believe he's gone now, sadly, he's retired. And he was a guy that was at the scat tracks and all of those, in the 90s, he would go every year. So he was a really, really tuned in guy, but he's retired now, sadly. So that dealership's gone. But I would have imagined that would have been so problematic for him as a dealer to have to navigate keeping Sea-Doo happy and keeping Yamaha happy.
What's funny is that it holds the manufacturer's feet to the fire.
Yeah, and I love it.
For the consumer, gives us better product.
Yeah.
Because after 2 years of just, brand A kicking brand B's butt, brand B is going to go, all right, boys, what do we need to do to get competitive with brand A?
Yeah.
And that's open market capitalism. That's what we all
in the US. Do you have dealers in the US that will have both brands?
Oh, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here in the UK, it's not really a thing. It's normally
one and it's not at all in Australia. You can't be one. You have to be only one brand.
It sucks, right? Because for me, right now, I would love nothing more. I'm going to actually try and find someone who will have both crafts. I'd love to make a review video. You have both right next to each other. And even just on an aesthetic level, I think that would be enough for people to swing one way or the other, let alone what they ride like. So, And like, as you said, holding the actual manufacturers accountable, I think is critical to push the innovations of these crafts.
Oh, 100%. You're 100% correct. The problem is that we are now in such an environment that a dealer is forced to kowtow to the demands of that manufacturer or lose their contract. And I mean, you walk into a major dealer here in the US, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there's dealers where I live that are strictly Sea-Doo, or they may have mainly Yamaha and they've got like half a dozen Kawasaki's. But you can, if you go to a major dealer that has all the brands and they're all lined up, you can sit there and you can walk from one to the other and you can get on one to the other. And when you're in an environment that allows you to do that, that's the most conducive environment for an educated decision.
Agree.
And that's why I field so many questions, because people go, well, I don't know. I don't ride these things, and I have to rely on someone who goes on them and rides them. And I sit there and I go, but the problem is that I'm 6'2" and 240 pounds. You're not my build, nor do you have my experience. So when I give a review and I'm at the point where I'm like, I feel that I'm 80% wrong most of the time. I really do. And people call me out, like, Kevin doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I'm like, no, I don't. All I know is the world that I've seen through my eyes. So I'm sitting here now at 46 years old going, you know, I've seen a lot of jet skis come and go, and I've seen a lot of brands and a lot of a lot of themes and trends come and go. And I go, you know what, man? What I like is not going to be what you like. And so I'm probably going to give you the bad advice. So, like, I was joking with you earlier that I was like, yeah, I feel responsible for all the garbage that's on skis today. Because I'm sitting there going, rah, 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 isn't it great? And a bunch of gray-haired people are going, yeah, I want that too.
Here's the thing. So I've actually got quite a lot of real-world experience with a foot in both camp, right? So I absolutely love the nostalgia and all of the theatre that goes with two-stroke, and nothing will ever take that away because it's grained in my history and all that stuff. But because I've endorsed a Spark and what it stands for, I feel like I'm in this unique position to really critique. And people hate it, right? Whether you're in the two-stroke camp or in the new camp, the two-stroke fans hate that I will point out the merits of the Spark and vice versa, right? But what that's allowed me to do is really tune in on an honesty level, because I own both. What are the pros and cons of both? Because ultimately, someone said something to me, I think it was like 2 years ago now. I've never forgot it, right? It's just ingrained in, and it's almost frustrating. They said, Joe, yeah, it's great. You're obsessed with the old stuff. You're a valiant, you're keeping the classics alive. Great. But what about living in your time and living in your current moment? Because you only have your moment. Because I talk to guys, right, from the 90s, and they talk about all of the amazing race weekends and all this stuff. And I can only imagine how cool that was. But I'm 31 and my time is now. So I've now become more passionate about campaigning for getting something in my time that's something I can hang my hat on in 20 years' time, that I go, yeah, wow, I was really proud of that machine. And that's what these conversations are about. And that's why me poking Sea-Doo, and whether it happens or not is kind of irrelevant, because what's happened is I've started to switch this philosophy of like, yeah, I'm always going to love my XP. That's going nowhere. I'm going to ride that. I'm going to enjoy it. No one's taking that away from me. But I want something in the modern day that truly satisfies me and I don't feel shortchanged. And that's kind of the process and what I'm going on at the moment. But the bit that I was really trying to touch on is my dad was riding XPs and two-strokes in the 90s. And he'd been there, got the T-shirt, maybe a little bit like yourself. And he kind of explained to me, like, when I started the channel, he would ride the GSXs and he would hate it because he'd be like, look, these machines are just... They're from the past. And he actively was the consumer that was like, Joe, I want nothing more than a compliant ST3 hole that I can go to, the sea, and we're in a really choppy environment, and I can feel confident as the rider that I can do what I want to do. And you can be there on your Spark, bouncing everywhere and having to input. And so I'm not for trying to campaign for this like real hard-edged agenda, which some people are from the two-stroke period, which is get rid of everything, because ultimately there are the consumers that need that product. I'm just campaigning hard for that real niche, because it is niche, let's face it. Not everyone wants to have to ride a machine and have to work their butt off to get the capability out of the machine. And I guess that's the biggest tricky bit at the moment. It's like finding the sweet spot between pushing the needle to where we want it, but equally not sort of ostracizing people that generally want the machines that are bigger for like valiant reasons.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, you're exactly right. And I think that is, quite frankly, the impetus of why I felt a kinship with what you were saying, in your videos that I've seen. And I'm of the mindset of the group that you said just a minute ago that says, maybe we should kill the big old fat heavy skis. And I'm not truly advocating that. I think that's me being a little extreme.
Yeah.
But I do want to advocate that audience does not give us a future.
No, true.
Okay. And if I may, I was giving some thought today. I really wanted to stew on tonight's topic, and I was thinking about it, was the Fish Pro, the Explorer Pro are reactions to a buying audience to go, well, you can use this for something else that you like to do. And it was dressing and contorting and twisting an existing product to now appeal to a new market. Now, don't get me wrong, recreation fishing market is something to the effect of like $54 or $52 billion a year.
This blows my mind.
Right.
Is this a US thing? But in the UK, for me, jet skis and fishing shouldn't be in the same category.
The US is slow to it. It's Australia and South Africa and the Pacifica Islands that are pushing this so hard. I'll tell you, Australia, if you critique jet ski fishing, you might as well go to Italy and talk trash about the Pope.
That's my next video then, right? I'm gonna talk about fishing.
Please do. I would, yeah.
I know nothing. This is the problem. I don't talk on things I know nothing about. But
if I can, what I'm saying is that your enthusiasm for this period and its evolution in modern Rec Lite and the modern Rec Lite watercraft, I don't think we've had a better opportunity to shoot for the moon than we do with the new JetBlaster and with the current Spark.
Yeah.
And I think if these manufacturers and the persons within it are serious about cultivating a new, younger audience, it's not doing wheelies on the water. It's fast. It's a go-kart on the water, and you can buy one, and it's cheaper than, or it's the same price as, or within some reasonable rate of the Trixx.
I agree.
And to your point of, listen, go 100% in. If the Trixx is for doing stunts and wheelies and 360s and all that kind of fun stuff, don't have the Spark X do the same thing. Have the Spark X be different. And have the Trixx be different.
Did you notice with my concept, and people have asked me this, well, why have you omitted Trixx off of Spark? That was intentional. That was intentional, guys.
Yes.
Like, I envisioned the Spark XP is the performance variant of the Spark, not the huge extended VTS, not the foot wedges, none of that. That's all, not even potentially the Razor handlebars. I think that's the least of the that's a non-topic, but definitely the foot wedges and the huge extended VTS that wouldn't be a characteristic I particularly associate. Yeah.
Make it exclusive to the Trixx. Same goes for the Pro. The
Yeah.
Blaster Pro, if they make I'll tell you what, keep the JetBlaster name, make the high performance one the Wave Blaster.
Yeah. Honestly, that would blow my mind. Then I really would be torn. If Sea-Doo brought out an XP and the Yamaha brought out a Wave Blaster, then honestly, I think
that's the title fight that you need to do. Get your Photoshop ready and Photoshop me a Wave Blaster in B1 colors and an XP in this, and say this is the title fight that needs to happen in 2026.
This is the thing. I got one question, and I don't want to refute because I'm 100% agree with what you said. Do you think a consumer in 2024 wants to be riding a yellow and pink? And this is something I've told you quite a bit.
All right, that's a good question.
Because people have said to me, Joe, why the hell have you put pink on a mask? What you're perceiving as a masculine? And I'm like, well, for me personally, I think the 90s had some of the nicest colorways. But then there's this whole culture sort of thing whereby people are saying, well, the 90s is this over-the-top, garish color palette. Why are you chasing that? But so where do you stand on that?
I love it, but again, I come from I'm a relic.
Would you ride this if it did 60 miles an hour? Would you ride it?
If factory came out, I'll tell you what. We already have the answer to this question. 2014.
Yeah.
#1 seller.
The colors were awesome. When the Spark first came out, right? The color explosion. Do you remember the paint explosions in the commercial?
I was there. It was Lake Okeechobee. I was there when they filmed it.
It looks so cool. Like
water cannons.
It just it slowly, like the DNA slowly kind of got extracted. I have one question as well, because people have asked me on this, Joe, why with all of your mock-ups have you predominantly gone with black? My understanding as to why I always do the mock-ups this way is Sea-Doo. If you look at every model since 2014, the underside is always black.
Yes.
And the predominant chassis is in the main hull.
Correct.
Not the front panel and the back panel have to be black because of the predominant recycled-based plastic they use.
100% correct. Now, the only thing that you can do if you wanted to have fun is that the parts and accessories department still has a very vibrant wrap program.
Right.
And they could certainly wrap a ski.
But
yeah,
I've got a lot of shade for people saying, Joe, you always leave loads of black in there. That was my understanding, that you were always going to expect black.
That is exactly what a factory unit would look like, except for the fact that the Sea-Doo XP logo on the side would have a splash of pink or a splash of yellow in there.
And also as well, I think I'm being optimistic with foot wedges going pink. They'd probably make those black, right, as well.
They'd probably get rid of the foot wedges.
Of course, yeah, we discussed this. Maybe I should do that then. My next Photoshop session is going to be foot wedges gone. Maybe like a fix
and a one-seater. Keep it a one-seater.
Yeah. Although I've actually, so here we go. I've got a 2021 lava red and black Trixx, and I had to go last year on the 24 facelift 1-up. I'm not a huge fan of the wider seat. I'm sorry, people are going to hate that. I like the narrow motocross style original seat. That for me personally is better. But this is where I get excited. I don't know if this is just hearsay, but people say, well, actually, dimensionally, under the seat, it's wider.
Yes.
Plus the engine access, all posturing.
Access, open up the panel. Here's the thing, and I show this to Greg. You open up that access panel on the side, stick your forearm in there, and see how much room there is around the engine and the actual cowl.
So you agree? You concur that it's wider underneath. That's why we've got this
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Love it. That's what I suspected. So I can get anything that is in benefit to a faster spark. I can get on board with, even if the seat on paper is more restrictive.
Hey, you know what? You can always have a custom seat made. You can head up Jet Trim out in Lake Havasu and have a custom seat sculpted. But
then again, 95. So one thing I love about the 95 is the hump seat, right? Which was a very racer-esque thing, and it got brought back on the SPX 99, I believe. that's kind of is a small hump, but it's kind of again got this old philosophy. I really wish that there was this deep, meaningful rationale going on behind the scenes, but part of me just feels like it's me romanticizing over stuff that's, you know, like conspiracy theories almost.
No, we are, to your question about Pink, we already know the answer. 2014, Pink was the #1 seller.
Really?
Oh, yes. I'm not exaggerating. Pink was the #1 seller.
I think Pink looks badass. I just think it looks so electric.
Pink was #1 seller. Yellow was second.
Okay, interesting.
All right, it was. And I had a yellow one. I had a yellow 14. I had it for 2 years.
If you can, call up my Instagram, because I got some other colors on there, and you'll see some of the cool stuff I've done around SPI and XP. And this started to really open up this whole can of worms where I was thinking, like, you could in theory on paper lean into the actual tiering. I don't think they do it. It's a bit of a romantic idea, but you could hypothetically have a 60 horsepower SP or SPI. You could have a Trixx, which was the 90 horsepower. And then you could have this XP as the top of the tree performance model. And you could kind of lean into the, so I actually changed the colorways to I think I went for the 90, 94 or 93. You know, the green and the red that they had on the XP? That would look quite cool. I went with the purple and the orange, which we saw on the SPI. It's on my Instagram if you can pull it up, but it looks.
I am right now.
So your audience can see it. So if you scroll down just a little bit. So
we did the yellow and the blue.
Yeah. So, and as well, this is leaning into, you remember the
Look
old
at this. Holy cow.
So if you think about the 93 and the 94, they were like a pinky red and green. And if you think about the SPI, they did it in purple and orange. But what got really exciting for me, you think about the Jet Pilot, like we saw a lot of the blue, punchy and yellow wetsuits that were around in the 90s. That's kind of that's the stuff that I'm leaning into. But and obviously if you scroll down anymore, then you get into all the exciting two-stroke-ness.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
For me, I just think when you think about a PWC, a playful one, I think it inherently needs to ooze toyness, if that makes sense.
Correct. Yeah. There's nothing inspirational about beige.
No. Sack whoever said yes to sand immediately.
Well, okay. I understand that they were doing a 20-year reference to the 20-year, 05 RXT and RXP 215.
Was that the one with the weird leg fender?
No.
Remember that one? The one with the weird.
Yeah, I do. That was a GTX. It was a limited 2005 Sea-Doo.
I never understood those wing things that went over the leg.
It was more people complaining about, I don't want to be wet when I ride, or my legs get cold when I ride. Surely
that would, obviously I've never rode one, but surely that would just be like leg breaking incident if you hit. Right. Okay. So that's in homage to.
Yeah. That is.
But this was my theory. So I made a follow-up video and I said, with gel coat, you can get away with using a beige because it refracts the light and it looks shiny, right? And anything that shines, it doesn't matter what material it is, inherently looks nicer than a dull plastic. What happens when you go to Polytech is it looks like an off-white and it looks dull. So you don't get the same luxuries. Like, for example, if that was shiny, maybe it would look better. But because it's plastic, anyone that stood next to a real issue with Polytech, not to get into the weeds here, is how you keep it looking lustrous over time. So you have to constantly treat the
plastic. These are cast plastic. They're not, I mean, this. But the difference between the Yamaha and the Sea-Doo is that Yamaha painted their plastic.
Really?
Yes. And my understanding is, that's my understanding. I might be wrong.
Okay, because if that's true, instantly I would, again, painted plastic, in my experience of plastic that's painted, is normally a horrific combo.
Well, and this is just as cast. It's just microplastic beads that are heated up and pressed into a mold. So
the colorized panels are easy to keep looking nice. You know, in the 90s, right, a lot of the plastic went dull if left out in the sun.
Oh, yeah.
That's obviously like a recurring theme with
plastics. Sea-Doo's plastics still fade in the sun really bad, too. All right, we are literally an hour and 45 minutes into this one. This has been a fantastic conversation. We've got a handful of super chats.
Okay.
These people have paid to ask us questions. So, excuse me. Let's definitely get to.
It's been a pleasure, though, man. I knew this would be a long conversation because we've got a lot of similar mindsets.
I could go for another hour. This has been so much fun for me. So I know that would keep you up till 3 a.m, or if not further. But all right. Delvey writes, for my favorite YouTube channel, thanks for everything you guys do. Oh, thank you for the support. All right, not a question, but support. All right, we got Stu. Stu writes, long time here, Kevin. Today I got the chance to ride a Polaris MSX 150 750cc for 4-stroke 2-cylinder turbocharged engine, 70 miles per hour on glass with just me on it. Proof that a small engine can get up and go if power to weight ratio is properly dialed. Yeah, Polaris had something going on. And Polaris, believe it or not, was actually very close to executing a new entry into Watercraft back in 2019. I had seen spy photographs of a matte black 2-seater. It was more of a recreation size. It was not a Rec Lite. Right. So it'd be like a GTI or a VX.
Yeah.
And it was out in Milwaukee, out in the test lake, because I have a gentleman who has a cabin on that lake, and it's right across from the testing center that Polaris has. And Polaris had dropped a lot of money in investing in new boat lines.
Right.
They wanted to have a smaller entry for their new boat models, and it was going to be this personal watercraft. And I spoke with one major dealer, owner of the dealer. Actually, he's got a network of dealerships. And they said, oh, yeah, they've been talking to us and seeing if we were interested. And we said, well, we didn't know because we haven't seen anything. So unfortunately, with the 2020 election going the way it did, a lot of manufacturers chose to play it safe. And I think rightly so. So, yeah, it would have been really cool to see Polaris come back. The prototype isn't dead, and it's a lot of money to tool up for a prototype. So,
just as a segue, I actually get asked a ton for Polaris on the channel. It's a ski that I've not obtained yet, but a lot of people have this real cult-like love for Polarises. So, yeah, you never know. At some stage, old-wise, it's going to happen.
I only rode a Polaris Octane, their stand-up. I only rode it once, and it was a lot of ski. It was really designed. Well, it was designed by Chris Haggist. It was a racer ski.
This is one of the things that I find fun, right, about the old stuff, is you have this real exploration of riding different skis. I mean, the t-shirt you're wearing at the moment, I'm desperate to have a go on an X2. You know, you think of those sort of cool skis from the past, and I think that's the joy of why I chase a lot of the 90s, because there's a lot of characteristics to be had on different skis.
Well, I want to say 2.5 years ago, I was at dinner with some of the guys at Kawasaki, and I was sitting right across from Minoru Kanamori, and Kanamori is the head of their race team. He's always been the head of their race team. Kanamori is the head of a lot of their product development here in the U.S. And Kanamori goes, Kevin, what would you say about new X2? And I go, and at the time, they didn't have anything competitive. I mean, this was the introduction of the redesigned Ultra 310s.
Right.
I'm like, you have nothing competitive for the naturally aspirated market. You have nothing competitive for, I mean, you just started getting into the recreation segment, and you're talking to me about an X2. You're out of your mind. And he kind of quietly laughed and drank his beer, and he goes, oh, you don't like X2? I'm like, I love the X2, but it's the stupidest decision you can make right now. Oh, we'll see. So anyway.
Cool.
course, he knows I'm a blabbermouth, so maybe he was just teasing me. All right. Mikey says, got to redo the FX hull, Gator Glide or gel coat for racing. Well, you can get away with a lot of damage with Gator Glide. Gator Glide is the guys who are Gator gliding their skis. They're acting like armored cars. They're driving. I mean, they're running up beaches. They're banging into logs. They don't seem to care. So
I've seen a lot of that on Instagram. You even see it with the beautiful new RXPs 325s, and it's the first thing they do. And I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. It's like
because you have to refinish your hull. I personally would go gel coat, but that's me.
Yeah, I agree.
And of course, it wouldn't match your hull because it's going to be painted. You know, it'd be red to red, or, you know, they don't do a black hull with a red deck or whatever it is. I mean, they typically don't. Now, if you had an all black ski, I'd gel coat the hell out of it like that. Gator Glide typically is for the person who is the adventure rider, the swamp or the river rider who runs into a lot of debris, goes up on a lot of beaches. The racer, A, wants to save money, and B, wants longevity. I personally would go gel coat, but that's again, I literally said I'm wrong about 80% of the time. So, but thank you, Mikey. Appreciate it. Mikey comes back. Wouldn't SMC behave better in race chop? He's talking in regards to the JetBlaster.
Right.
You're going to see less flex out of SMC fiberglass as you would Polytech or polypropylene.
Which is super interesting, right? It is a point of contention. So a lot of people say, so elasticity, what I call elasticity, even if I'm using the wrong terminology there, for a playful ski is great, right? Kinetic energy in a hole allows it to whip, and it's all great. When you want performance in a ski, you want a bit of rigidity, right? So
correct.
There might be a point in that. I mean, the truth is, I mean, I don't know what the landscape looks like with JetBlaster and how it'll be raced and stuff, but potentially.
My biggest concern is the same concern that I had with the GTR and the GTR-X.
You rode that. I'm so jealous, right? I still can't ride one. Is it as good as what I theoretically think it could be?
The GTR-X?
Yeah.
300. It's a riot.
Did you whip it? Did it feel like a GTI in terms of the way that it whipped around, or did it feel more cumbersome? Yeah.
Identical. The problem is that I actually I find that I would actually prefer the 230.
Really? Okay.
The only reason being is the 230, it's the idea of driving a slow car fast versus a fast car slow. And
okay, yeah, I'm with you.
It's really fun to really push a slow car to its limit. And the 230 is, in my opinion, just enough that I can really be a hoonigan, and really whip the tail around and really do some dumb stuff and never go, whoa, that was a close one. I've had a couple close ones with the 300.
Yeah, because inherently it's just crazy power, right? For that style of riding.
It really gets on there. And because I know the 300 really gets up and goes, I can't do a full throttle. I'm going full click and then just absolutely pin the bars.
That's all. Yeah, but this is the thing, Kevin. I'm glad you just touched on that. That was the exciting thing about the 90s, right? Me and my old man still have the same running joke to this day. It's like, yeah, flat out, bang the handlebars. And I've done it on the old XPs and stuff, but you can't do that obviously on the 300. You'd rip your shoulders out of the sockets.
Right.
But the point, I get what you're saying there, which has been my intrigue, is the 300 just too much of a performance machine? Because my dad said to me, look, if you've got a 300, buy a hole that's 300 capable. Don't buy a hole that's, you want to have playful fun on. And maybe you're right. I've heard really good things about the 230.
I think it's the Goldilocks comparison.
Yeah.
It's too much, it's too little, just right.
Yeah.
for the GTR X, I'm glad it exists. It should exist. I don't
You
want
think
it
it's going to stick around?
What's that?
Do you think it's going to stick around?
The GTR segment is always flexible. You'll see it discontinue, then you'll see them come back, and they'll trickle it in.
Yeah,
It's a parts bin unit. It's a unit that is Frankensteined from a lot of existing product. So it doesn't really cost them anything. Yeah. That's the nice thing, is that there's no extra tooling. And because of that, and quite frankly, the hull itself can physically take the dynamic torsional forces. Yeah. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about the quality of rider, because we have cultivated over the last 20 years riders who don't know how to ride.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. To your point that the ski does so much for them.
They're freaked out when the ski lets go.
Yeah. So, I tell people, read the water. What does that mean? I'm like, what does the ski want to do? I don't know what that means. You're like, oh, we're in trouble.
They're so funny. Just quickly, I know we're trying to wrap up, but my friend who's got a GTI, I let him have one go on my GSX in what's called the Southampton Solent. Google it here in the UK. And as soon as he got on, two things happened. Number one, he said, "Why is it not starting instantly?" I said, "Dude, it's two-stroke. Push the button, give it a bit of gas, it will go." That's the first thing. Second thing, he said, "It moves every time I move my foot or move my hand." I said, "Yes, that's riding. Now you're riding. Now we've got you somewhere." And he was like, "I'll take my GTI back," because you get on the GTI right, and you could literally just, even on the GTI, and obviously when you go to the ST3s, it blows my mind that you could just look at the chop, and when you're on a two-stroke, you're like, right, that's going to be bad. Slow down. On a ST3, you just keep going. You don't slow. It's crazy.
It's well, the problem is that it's like schools being motivated by government to have graduates, and so, well, if we get more graduates, we're going to get more money from the government, so we're going to lower our standards so that everybody comes in and graduates.
Right. Yeah.
And what we've done is that we've asked less of our riders, less and less and less and less and less, and to the point that, quite frankly, the most physically incapable person can get on these things and ride comfortably and have a great day on the water. Now, that might sound like Kevin is saying that's a negative. Don't we want this for everyone? I'm like, oh, well, that's a nice warm thought, but I kind of don't want everyone driving a car. I would say that's
conducive. I would say everyone being on the water having fun immediately, I would say conducive with boredom over time. And people say that's counterintuitive, my theory there. But if you can do a lap over and over and over and over again the same way, there's nothing unique. There's nothing fresh over time. Right. If you have, like, what I mean, Kevin, if you ride an old XP, every lap you have to be tuned in. The way the water hits the hull, something different could happen. You could spin out. And that, to me, keeps me excited for longer. Now, whether what you're saying is that the expectation of someone riding a craft is that they don't want to be doing with all of that nonsense. They just want compliance. I don't know is the truth.
Well, oh no. Hey, okay. Let's just call a spade a spade. Americans have never been fatter and lazier ever since we threw your tea in a harbor.
Yeah.
All right. Americans don't want their recreation to require any sort of physical exertion.
Yeah, I don't get it.
All right. And so that's why we have obese kids on tablets, and they're not outside in the sun playing ball or anything like that. So
yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. I actually rode my first ever stand-up, right? And the common consensus was, Joe, you'd never be able to ride one. You're a couch rider, which is this whole argument, right? I got straight on it and rode it. Yes, it was a 24 Superjet, so I know that there's this whole nuance around the older square noses and stuff are harder. But the point I'm getting at is there was a guy there on a 325, and he looked every bit the ultimate racer, right? And I can remember thinking, wow, this guy's so fast. And I actually felt, when I fell off the stand-up, inevitably, he came over and dragged me back to the stand-up, and he said, dude, I've had one go on a stand-up previously. He said my thighs were burning. I couldn't stand on it. I went straight back to my 325. And in that moment, the penny dropped. There's me actually, like the endurance wasn't the issue for me with the stand-up. It was the cognitive recognition of doing everything. So the stem and everything. That was the biggest change for me. But the endurance of the lactic acid and stuff, that wasn't the problem. So that to me suggested that because I've been spending so much time to ride the couches fast, there's kind of a transferability. If you think of like Chris the Fish in the day, he was riding stand-ups and the sit-downs. Where I'm going with this, I think a good 325 rider would be not good on like a traditional two-stroke or a stand-up, because it's so, I don't want to use the word easy, because you still have to be good, but it's a lot easier. The barrier to entry is a lot easier on these bigger skis.
Oh, agreed. I agree 100%. And that's why there's, the maxim still holds water that if you can ride a stand-up, you can ride anything.
Yeah.
Because the stand-up rider, in the sense of like a very well-trained motorcycle rider, is one of the best drivers. Because a motorcycle rider is aware of all the dangers at all times. Their head is on a swivel.
Mm-hmm.
So they're aware of what every car is doing and the behavior. Like, that guy's not paying attention. This person's drifting. This person's on their phone. So a motorcycle rider who's driving a car is going to be one of the safest drivers.
Yeah.
On paper. All right. I might be wrong. Someone can give me an example why I'm wrong, but whatever. So to that effect, a stand-up rider who is an apt stand-up rider is going to read the water, know what the ski is doing, know how to position themselves. They're going to be far more engaged, especially in a dynamic surface, like you were saying about going around a buoy course. After about 2 or 3 laps, that water has churned into a broiling mass. It's not cruising down glass for 50 miles straight.
Yeah.
That's exhaustively boring.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in the soup, now you're testing your skill, and now you're testing your physical ability. Now you're testing what the design of the ski can do.
Yeah.
So that's why a more engaging, a more challenging watercraft is needed.
Agree.
And that's going to be met, and it's going to be received by a younger audience. It's not going to be the 62-year-old who's going to go out and buy this on 9 times out of 10. It's going to be the younger rider. Mm-hmm. So again,
we're in complete agreement. I think compliance needs to reduce.
Let's get this last super chat, and we're going to let him go. We had a whole bunch of comments come in, but these are the people who paid to come up and give their support. Uno writes, the Riva ride plate made the world of difference on my FX SVHO. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate all you do. Well, thank you very much, Uno. I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad that the plate worked out and you were able to tell a difference. That means that you are similar to what Joe and I have been talking about, and that is a cognitive rider. So I'm glad that worked out for you, and thanks for supporting Riva. They support us. Let's check out the last bit of questions. Doesn't look like we had any more questions come in. And yes, Stu, you're exactly right. I misspoke in saying it was a 4-stroke. The Polaris was a 2-stroke. You're exactly right. The MSX 110 and 140 was a 2-stroke. The comment said 4-stroke, and I'm apparently a slave to the teleprompter and just read what I'm told. But we are going to let this poor man go to bed. He actually has to get up to work tomorrow. And
it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you getting me on and kicking the breeze, and hopefully we all get what we want and see the faster spark in the near future.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't, we'll just routinely keep doing this call to keep probing until we get what we want.
Well, I have been told on good authority that corporate, all 3 corporate, tend to tune in every now and again, and by now and again, I want.
Well, I hope they enjoy the content as opposed to hate my content. I am aware that Sea-Doo is two strokes are a thing of the past. But look, I'm endorsing both, right? I have a foot in the old and I have a foot in the new, and I'll for sure give the new its credit where it's due. So if they give us a faster Spark XP, I'll have an old XP and a new XP. Happy days.
Well, I think the best thing about it is that you're advocating the type of rider, regardless of the powertrain, is you're advocating and you're proving it with you're proving it on the water that the level of enjoyment that can be had in a small body of water with a smaller craft is equal, if not greater, than a person dropping 20 grand and rarely going out and riding.
Yeah.
So I really do think you are doing the Lord's work. I want to strongly recommend that everyone who listens to this podcast go over to Classic Jetskis, give this man a sub, give this man a follow, hit the notification bell.
I appreciate that.
How often do you put out product or put out content?
It's minimum one a week. My standard upload time is a Sunday at 4 p.m. That's like my dedicated slot.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do at the moment is to get more visibility to the channel, is to do a midweek upload. And normally the midweek upload is more my voice, so it's more my discussion. I've realized that recently by me talking about the new stuff more frequently, it's a gateway to get. So for example, a lot of people my age are not even aware of this period or these skis. And that's not, that's no reflection of them. That's just the fact that the education piece around there is just not that much. If you think about an old two-stroke, most of the content is old VHS wobbly footage from the 90s. My job is to get people in with the gateway of the new stuff, whether that be the Spark or the RXPs or whatever it might be. They then land on the channel. 9 times out of 10, people go, oh, wow, there's an XP or there's a GSX. And if I can just do a little bit to move the dial, then I'm a happy boy, because for me, I just lightweight, playful ski is what makes me tick. Whether that changes in years to come, who knows? But for the last however long, for me, I just want ultimate connection with the water. And that's why I think the next thing for the channel, for anyone who watches prospectively, stand-ups are coming, guys. People ask me about this all the time. I'm going to dip my toe into stand-ups, probably an old Cowie for the first time on the channel. I had the bug. I've got the bug. So let's make it happen.
Find a 3D. Be the only content creator with a 3D.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually saw a brand new 3D here in the UK.
No,
but even with a brand new 3D and the luster that presents, I'll be a mean. Maybe the 3Ds are good, but it's not one that I'm reaching for.
No. It's just that was a very interesting experiment. That was
let's get your hot to finish, which is a nice fitting way. Let's get your favorite couch two-stroke from the 90s and your favorite stand-up, and that will hopefully influence my decision on stand-up. So equally, my viewers that watch my channel will know what Kevin's favorite two-stroke of the couch-wise of the 90s.
Favorite sit-down of the 90s would either be the first generation Blaster, or I'm really partial to the 97 GP Yamaha, the 1200.
Good picks.
I had a lot of fun on that. That was my first Catalina race. My first offshore race was on the 1200, GP 1200. So I'm very partial to it. I know it's the beginning of the bigger two strokes, but I just have too many memories, pleasant memories on that ski to deny it. Favorite stand-up of all time still remains the SXR 800. SXR 800. I put more people on that ski who wanted to learn how to ride a stand-up, and that was the ski they jumped on and they could ride. And awesome. I'm a bigger guy, and I'm not nearly as athletic as I once was, and I still love the 800. The 800 is one of the most well-balanced. It's torquey. It's got a fantastic power band. It was the gold standard for racing for a long time, stock and limited classes. And
So what year are we looking here?
Oh, geez. They made it. It remained the same from 04 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 90s, though. I did say 90s, Kevin. Come on.
Oh, for stand-ups?
Yeah.
Ah.
Because my channel will come for me if I say
I know.
I go for 2000.
I have a little experience on a square nose Yamaha. My brother had a square nose that he loved. Wasn't my favorite, but pretty familiar with the square nose Superjet. 701. Yeah, I guess I'd go there. I mean, I was okay. 650 the 650 Cowie was okay. I just didn't like a lot of them. I mean, they were serviceable. They did the job. I mean, I rode a 550 with I rode a 440, my dad's 440 with a 550 pump, but that was an 88. I rode that till I was blue in the face. That dates me. You're making me you're making me pick a 90s. I'll do you one better and pick an 88.
Well, I can't comment. My knowledge base for 80s is obviously non-existent, but I know that the 90s has some really, really, poignant models that a lot of people go to. So you've obviously got a lot of love for the square noses, which a lot of people say to me, like, Joe, get a square nose. And I guess it's got like that quintessential primitive styling as well. Like when you think about an old stand-up, it looks old, which I think is great. When they went to the round nose, I think it started to look more modernistic and stuff, which is definitely something I search for in the garage. I love that old product styling.
Right. So yeah, I mean, the problem is I mean, you're asking me to cheat on my wife when you ask me to pick another stand-up, and the SXR 800, and I know it's 04, 04 to 12, but I'm telling you,
if one comes up, I'll send you the link, and you can tell me how good it is.
Yeah, it's I need to buy a stand-up the same way I need to buy another project.
What do you actually ride? I'm assuming you ride.
Right now, what I have I don't own anything.
You obviously have the luxury of getting to ride these machines. But
yeah, I haven't. I think the last jet ski I physically owned was a 2009 RX TX 255 because that was my last race boat.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't own anything else. They were never in my name. But the skis I have right now on the trailer are the 2024 GTR X 300, and then I've got the 2024 Ultra 310 LSX.
Nice.
And
good stuff.
They're big old barges, and they're thirsty, and they're comfortable, and you can sit there and pick your nose and look at your phone while going full speed. And
well, here's the deal. If you ever come to the UK, hit me up. You can have a go on an old two-stroke of your choice. I've got 9 to pick from. And if I ever come to the US, I want to go on that GTR.
Absolutely. We'll put you on a boat. That's no problem.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure, buddy. I'm going to
absolutely, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. You guys already know the spiel. Subscribe, like, all that jazz. We're going to let this man go to bed, and that's going to be it.
Guys.
Thanks
pleasure.
for tuning in. We'll talk soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.